birds of a feather flock together. Aristotle is the one who came up with that. And the statement was made about 2,000 years ago by this famous philosopher, Aristotle. And it is true today that it was true back then and it's true today. How many of you hear that? And the observation that was made here is about the flocking habits of various birds. And but really applies in a figurative sense to how we choose our friends. How many of you listening? They're true friends who will stick closer than a brother. And be there no matter what happens in your life. How many of you hear that? Those are true friends. And true friends stick closer than a brother, Jesus said. And I'll tell you some story in just a second. And then the number two, there are those who you seek out as friends to help you become successful in your field of work or school or your career or whatever, sports or something, and you seek them out. Sometimes these two groups become one and the same. Sometimes the people that you are out to get you to help you in your job and in your career pursuit, they become your friends. That does happen. And but really, there's usually the people that you get to help you learn a particular kind of job or help you in your particular field. That's a friendship based on a need. Have you heard that? You go to work and you see people at work and you consider them your friends. You say, "Hi, I work with these people and they are my friends." But the truth of the matter is they are often not really your true friends. How many of you hear that? And if it was known, if people would be honest, people today, kids especially, want a friend. Proverbs 19:4, it says, "Wealth maketh many friends." How many of you know that you can have friends that are based on your job, based on, like if you were to ask one of the Ravens, are those guys my friends? They will say, yeah, they're my friends, but it's based on a career. It's based on finances. It's based on money. How many of you hear that? Then there's friendship. These birds are the same feathers now. Like Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Now, how many of you know there are two different types here, a true friend and then a friend born in adversity? What does that mean? Well, I think it means this, saints. There are people who have a common calamity or an event in life, 9/11, or the Boston bombing, or the Sandy Hook school thing, or some other event, and that event brought them together as friends. How do you hear that? And they will talk about it, and they will meet, and they will gather, and they will remember that they were part of the group that landed on the Hudson, and they were in that U.S. airline, and they got out on the wing, and they all lived. And how many of you know there's a camaraderie of that comes, and it's the same thing in the military. You get out of the military, and you were in a harrowing situation, and you came away and you have friends that were birthed in adversity. How many of you get this? And how many of you know those kind of friends can be true friends? They can grow to true friends, but not necessarily are they true friends. And then there are people, this is the fourth one. These are these are the friends that you're born into. Now, I'm not talking about natural birth. There are many times in church life that friendships are created because we were born again into the family of God. I'm going to read 1 Samuel 18:1. Now, when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Are you listening to me? In our divinely ordered steps, our true friendships will have some evidence that God is the uniter, and not just our need for advice, comfort, or tragedy. How many of you know the need of just based on tragedy cannot withstand things, because tragedy is not something that you can build on? How many of you hear that? You have to build on something a whole lot more solid than just the tragedy of a moment. Just because you and them have the same story of lining up. I was in a plane crash, and I have a story with these same people that were in the plane crash. And yet, I'm not talking to them. I'm not leaning on them. I'm not relating to them. And if we see each other, we're instantly bonded. But that tragedy can't sustain me. How many of you hear that? I'm not sustained by the death of Jesus. I'm sustained by the resurrection of Jesus. How many of you hear that? And how many of you know, just because I have a friendship and I have counsel and I have a need, that is not how I build my friendships. I don't want to build it because they help me invest right or get stocks and bonds or my relationship with some broker or something. I don't want that. The friendships that are necessary are the kind that will last, and they're true, and they'll see you at your worst and still be your friend. But there's some people that you get to know in the house of God, and they become your friends. And they're supposed to be. How many of you hear that? And what happens is you get born into it. And one thing about it is true friends will have the same feathers you have. When you get involved with people and you find out that you all of a sudden, that you're being redefined by them, and you find out they have different feathers, it's going to be hard to flock together. And what happens is all of a sudden you get around people and they believe it's up when you believe it's down, or they believe it's down when you believe it's up, or some reversal. And all of a sudden you can't seem to fly the same. You can't seem to flow the same. There's something that's different about it, and it's because you don't have the same feathers. If you put two groups of people in a room, one group is going up, one group who is going up, desiring to be successful, desiring to be an overcomer, desiring to be fruitful, and speaking on those things, abundant life, positive life, joyful life. How many of you know what will happen? Those people will attract to one group in a room. Another group's in the room. You see the other group who is always, the glass is always half empty, full of defeatism, resentments, and envy, and who are always critical of others, especially if they are successful. How many of you know what will happen to them? They'll isolate over into their little group. How many of you know what happens? Next thing you know, the ones that are complainers, the ones that are critical, the ones that are always murmuring, how many of you know they flock together? And how many of you know the ones that are saying, no, God is greater, we're overcomers, we're the head, not the tail, we're above, not below, hallelujah, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens. How many of you know that group will seem to feather up together, and they will fly in unison together, and they will seemingly hang out together? Every church has got to have its own personality. We can't mimic every other church, but we've got to be who we are by the grace of God. And because of it, we've got to decide that we're part of a flock. And we look at the feathers and say, man, you got the same feathers that I do. You may be a fat duck, I may be a skinny duck. Or you may be a tall duck and I may be a short duck. It don't matter about that, but we got the same feathers. Proverbs 13:20 says, Solomon wrote it this way, that the man who walks with wise men will be wise. How many of you know, you get with the wise people who've got the right feathers, how many of you know what's going to happen? You're going to get wise. You're going to get smart. How many of you hear that? You're going to talk about faith. You're going to talk about possibility. You're going to talk about the good things of God. How many of you know if you can find those people, just take your little wings and flutter up to them, because they're going to help you fly like you should fly. 1 Samuel chapter 10. Look at this story. Now, verse 26, I'm going to jump ahead of myself, but then I'm going to come back. And it says, and God put Saul in the right flock in the beginning of his life. Saul also went to his home in Gibeah, accompanied by valiant men whose heart the Lord had touched. You see, the story of Saul and how he evolves through this process is so much like what happens to us. Saul was put deliberately by God around people who were going to be successful, who were going to be overcomers. But Saul got drawn into the wrong flock. Now here is Saul, and Saul now, he gets surrounded, okay? He gets surrounded, and God surrounds him with courageous people because of the assignment, his purpose from God, and was to rid Israel of oppression and influence and all the surrounding pagan tribes, the Amorites, the Philistines, and the Jebusites. During this entire career as king, he had the company of valiant, steadfast warriors around him. One of them was David. And here Saul can call on the resources of support to cause him to be a great king, and he loses his kingship. Saints, listen to me. Your friends will make you or break you. Your friends will determine your future. Your friends will determine who you serve and how well you serve who you serve. Verse 5, after that you shall come to the hill of God where the Philistine garrison is, and it will happen when you have come over to the city that you will meet a group of prophets coming down from the high place with string instruments, a tambourine, a flute, a harp before them, and they will be prophesying. Saul got born into Samuel's life, and Samuel was the prophet who put oil on him and kissed him. How do you know that was a sign of favor of God? And how many of you know that what happens here in this story is Saul, when they need him, if you read later, Samuel talks about it in verse 22. It says, therefore, they inquired of the Lord further, has the man come here yet? And the Lord answered, no, there he is, hidden among the equipment. What was Saul doing? Saul got away from those that God had set him in the body as it pleased the Lord. And he was where? He was hiding. Now notice this story, saints. Notice this today. Saul never went and pursued Samuel or those prophets. He went and he pursued others. He even went and pursued a witch that would call up a dead person at one point. He sought everybody else but Samuel. Who was it that touched him first? Who was it that was the influence of the prophetic over him? Samuel. Who was his covering? Samuel. But what did he do? He sought everything else into the point where he lost his kingdom. Now, David was a key role in his life. And Saul never sought out the company of Samuel the prophet, nor other prophets that Saul in the beginning was exposed to. This is why Saul even prophesied in this sovereign move of God. We see that Samuel had to seek Saul out to find him hiding in the clutter or the stubborn donkey's bend and the asses, where the asses were at. This is where they found him. How many of you know when you reject what God sets up for you in your relationship, saints, what happens is you will be found somewhere you shouldn't be. We see that Samuel had to seek Saul out. It's important to be connected with those who are like-minded in the Lord, who are going to pull you up and push you up. True friends, those with the same feathers as you, will even wound you at times. Proverbs 27:6 says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. When you find a true friend, they're going to have feathers just like you. Because birds of a feather, they do flock together. Remember, a true friend is the gift of God. And only he, And only he who made hearts can unite true friends.